There are people who think that Martin Heidegger was an ISTJ. I have been for a long time a defender of the view that he was an INTJ, he was an NI dominant and not an SI dominant. And since I think it was Aubrey who commented on it not that long ago, perhaps it was when I contributed my video on the type of Wittgenstein as an INFJ. So I don't think Heidegger is an INFJ, but I think that he is a close cousin, and I experience very strong resonance when I read his work. Now, obviously, my single personal example is not a sufficient indicator of what his type is, but I still think that he is an NI dominant, and I wanted to sort of recap some of the points that I made, I think it was on Personality Database, and I think they still hold, and this is kind of the essence of my view. I think that Michael Pierce is one of those, great YouTuber, Michael Pierce, author of the book Motes and Beams, that I think is a kind of a bit of a classic among the community as well. He really defended the view that Heidegger was an SI dominant. There is, and I'm not talking about Michael's argument here, but often the argument is for Heidegger is that this focus on Heidegger's deep focus on the past in a sense, and also on getting at like the existential conditions required for us to be the kind of train passing by won't last too long, don't worry. Existential conditions for us having the kind of embodiments that we do in the world. And I think that people say, well, ultimately Heidegger is not really forward looking, and he's kind of trying to articulate a philosophy of our connection to, what he calls the dwelling, like the earth, being grounded in the earth. There's some connections that you can establish if you want with Nazism as well, but there's this strong idea that, in a sense, Heidegger's thought is a deep investigation of the already existent, rather than, if you like, a deep investigation of the existence and the not yet existent. And well, the thing is, I think that the exploration of the not yet existence is often the work of extroverted perception, but because, it's working together with introverted perception, certainly is. They always work together, these two functions, but because extrovert perception gathers information in the external world, and introvert perception processes it and produces patterns. But there's one difference between NI and SI and I've talked about this in my video released not so long ago about the differences between NI and SI. One thing that you will always notice is that SI, when it explores, because they're both very past connected, right? And they both try to bridge the past and the present in orienting themselves toward the future. In fact, they both do that. The difference often is that SI is more localized, and NI is more generalized, more global in its patterning. And I think that people tend to think that, well, Heidegger's way of wielding introverted perception, because people at least seem to agree that he was an introvert perceiver of some description, was more localized. Now, I would like to question this. First of all, Heidegger's pattern of introvert perception, he basically wanted to reinterpret the entire history of Western philosophy. So I don't call that very localized. That's the first thing. But the other thing that you have to keep in mind is that SI tends to be localized also in its attention to detail and its scrupulousness with accuracy. It can lead even sometimes to a certain kind of conservatism, right? Conservatism in the sense of, okay, like, we're not going to accept this kind of interpretation because we can't really connect it rationally to the other parts. Or it's not really fitting in. It's we could question whether this really belongs in there. It's maybe it threatens the consistency of what we're talking about. SI has this very strong concern with local consistency, and the thing is, Heidegger might look as if he's kind of, when he focuses on Dasein, on being, he can be seen to focus on certain local issues. But the manner in which he approaches them is so ambitious, so broad in a sense, and also, and that's the main aspect of what I want to say, it's so radical that, in fact, it glosses over a lot of subtleties and local details in the name of defending his particular perspective. It's well known that, for example, because people say, oh yeah, like he has this knowledge of etymology, he's able to hark back to, the old meaning of words, and that suggests SI. But in fact, most scholars will tell you that his interpretations of those words and their original etymologies, they're often quite iffy and kind of not reliable at all. They're very idiosyncratic, and you can suspect that they're often articulated to suit his larger vision, his larger perspective. If he was actually basing his work on the etymologies, I would say, yeah, okay, maybe that means SI, but he's clearly adapting the etymologies to his broader work, and that's more NI. It's more using what looks like localized arguments and techniques in defense of a much more broad and ultimately not that grounded in fact kind of theory. And the breadth of articulation, the originality of looking at the past in a new way, which can really be open to question. People may not agree with it, but it can be inspiring all the same. That's much more NI than SI. SI is often more workmanlike. I think that the philosopher Rudolf Carnap was described as workmanlike. He's an SI dominant in a philosophy podcast I listened to, and that's exactly it. SI is more workmanlike. If you look at Heidegger's work, they don't strike you as workmanlike. The vision is huge, and if there are certain details, in the sense they can get sucked into what is the priority for him is to offer this huge new pattern, right? So don't forget, the etymology in Heidegger is not that reliable. It's something that may just make you change your mind about whether he's SI or NI. Okay. So that's my argument anyway. I just wanted to revisit it briefly. Let me know in the comments what you think. Maybe you still think he's an ISTJ, and that's okay. I want to listen to your arguments or re-explore them. Don't forget that I have written a book on the INFJ recently called The Infinite Soul, on INFJ life in the modern world that is often seen as hostile to us. It's a book that looks at how to find and recover meaning, purpose, rich, higher lives in some way. So if you're interested, it's got good reviews. You can check the link below. And if you have got it, drop a review if you haven't yet. It really helps me with the referencing. Okay, I would appreciate that. Its predecessor is The Ecstatic Soul, which looks more at the contents of the INFJ mind, the consciousness, and its existential manifestation. I don't really need to describe the book much more because a lot of people know about it. But again, if you haven't got it, these books go well together, as the covers suggest. And to keep the channel going, donations really help me to keep going with this channel and my production of videos. So if you would like to support me on Patreon, you can interact with me there. I share some bonus content, have discussions, and most importantly, you support my work, which is pretty essential. So thank you to my supporters, and please consider it. The link is below. And I'll see you next time, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.